All right, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the last panel session that we had. And I'm super excited to introduce these ladies to you and to spend a few minutes talking about women in the industry. I forget the title, but then, now, and into the future. I think it was something like that. And it's wonderful to have a panel about issues with women being involved, but it was also fun to see the last panel where it happened to be three women that were on the panel. So that was great as well. So we'll start this afternoon with Emily White. It's been really fun. Emily has been team teaching with me for a couple of years now, and that's worked out fantastically for us. Hopefully it's worked well for her. Emily, would you come on and just give us a brief summary of your background and involvement in the industry?
Definitely. Thanks, Kim. My name is Emily White. I'm a founding partner at Collective Entertainment here in New York City. We do consulting and management. I'm also the founder of the hashtag I Voted Festival. We just announced I Voted Festival 2022 on Election Day. And I'm the author of How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams. That's an Amazon #1 bestseller. The podcast version of that book is the #1 music business podcast globally. And I'm also the author and host of Interning 101.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Katie Dean is a newer friend of mine, and I've actually roped her into doing some team teaching with me next fall. So I completely am not going to start thinking about next fall yet, but somewhere during the summer, we'll sit down virtually with the libation of choice and figure out what we're going to do to students next fall. Katie, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is of Universal Music Group, the world's largest music company. So I run a team of all-female regionals, actually, that are responsible for securing airplay and breaking artists and markets. So if you're a country fan, you may recognize some of our roster. We have everybody from Casey Musgraves to George Strait to Vince Gill, Reba, Kip Moore, Jordan Davis. We also handle country radio promotion for Taylor Swift as well. So a graduate of Appalachian State University, and I'm currently in this lovely hotel room in Dallas, Texas, as we are introducing a new artist to radio this evening. So there you have it.
But Katie, you aren't busy or anything, right?
Oh, no. Just back on the road. Back on the road.
Yeah. Couple of artists that you're working with.
Just a few.
And Leslie is my newest friend here. Leslie, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Here. And I guess I can say our youngest member of the panel to provide us with a different perspective here. Leslie, would you introduce yourself and tell folks what you've done up to this point?
Sure. Well, I'm a graduate of Florida State University. I'm currently based out of South Florida. I'm a freelance producer and production manager. I've worked for some of the country's top large-scale events and music festivals, a couple of them being Ultra Music Festival, Odyssey Beach Festival here in South Florida, and most recently, Preakness out of Baltimore. I've been in the industry for about 6 years now, and I'm part of Collective Entertainment with Emily White. I do day-to-day social media management there as well, and I'm pretty excited to be talking to you all here.
Yeah, and Emily tells us you're going places, so.
Yes, thank you. I've most recently am the festival director of I Voted Festival.
Nice, very good. So the first question I have for you ladies is a softball question. So this should be pretty straightforward for you. It's an easy one. The question is, do you feel women are on equal footing with men in all sectors of the industry at this point? Emily, one word answer.
Well, no, but can I elaborate on one word?
I'll get you there. I'll give you plenty of time.
Okay.
Katie, one word answer.
No.
Leslie, one word answer. Okay, so I kind of set that one up for us. I don't think anybody's surprised by that. Now, Emily, I'll get right back to you because I know you wanted to elaborate on that. Can you talk about whether you feel that gender or gender identity is a barrier to entry into the music industry?
I don't necessarily think it's a barrier to entry. I think we're great at hiring interns and assistants, but I don't think we're always by we, I mean the industry, I don't think we're always the best at then hiring and promoting women and non-binary folks as well as people of color. So again, I think we do a great job at kind of the undergrad level. I think companies are really well intended. I'm on the board of Well Done, which provides paid internships to underserved students, but I don't always see so many of the students we work with, like I said, hired and then promoted. I think the industry means really well when we're in college, but as we get to be 30 and above, it seems like things change.
Yeah. And Katie, being at the senior vice president level, what are you seeing at the early end of careers?
I definitely think promotion specifically has sort of long since been a very male dominated part of the industry. So I feel like that we have made a lot of really great strides there. I would also say country has worked really hard in the last couple of years of trying to be more inclusive just overall. So I'm really encouraged by where we're heading. I think that we have a lot of room left to grow, really. But I know when I first got into this business straight from Appalachian, actually, if you were a female, you basically were a publicist, and that was really your sort of primary option. So I'm really pleased to say that now I'm one of several senior vice presidents that are female at this level in the major label organization. To my knowledge, our all-female regional team is the only all-female regional team at a major label, but we're really seeing a lot of huge growth in terms of that segment of the industry. There are other segments of the industry that are woefully underrepresented in females, and that primarily, and Leslie may be able to speak to this a little bit too, but specifically in studio production, mixing, that kind of thing, less than 3% are female.
Leslie, your thoughts on this?
I feel like it's a bit of a mix, although I don't think for administrative positions there is a barrier entry, or when it comes to sectors of the music industry like talent management, but it's been my experience that in the more physical aspect of production, let's say music festival production, something I'm pretty versed in, there is a bit of a gap right there. I've seen, men not only promoted over me for their, tenacity, if I can say that, but I do think that at this moment, most of the opportunities that were given to me as a woman and as a person of color were given to me by women.
Okay. My next question, I think I'm going to start with Katie on. Just looking, I'm a little bit behind on my Billboard reading, but noticed in the Power List for 2022, there were 3 women in the top 20. And Katie, we'll start with you. Do you think there's a glass ceiling, or is it just harder for women to get to the top? What do you think about that?
It's funny. We talk a lot about female artists, specifically in country, and about them being sort of underrepresented. And I think part of it is almost like a supply and demand situation where my mentors were all male because I just didn't have females that were at that level. I can tell you that at Universal, most of our leadership team is female. Or it's 50-50 anyway. And that's a really drastic improvement over the last several years. So I feel like that you're seeing more and more of that. You're seeing, again, more females in segments of the industry that were not necessarily female friendly before. So I feel like there's been a lot of progress there. And I think that's indicative of the workforce overall too, where we just have more females applying for jobs, getting into whether it's STEM or entertainment, that kind of thing. So it's definitely improving for sure, but we're not there yet.
Do you see other elements of diversity in the top leadership levels at Universal?
At Universal overall, yes. I mean, in country, we still have work to do for sure, but I'm definitely seeing it. I'm part of a UMG female cohort team. So I'm working with people all around the globe, and it has been a really, a very sort of prominent directive from our board to sort of make sure that we are making inroads there. We have a whole division now called People, Inclusion, and Culture. So we're really making strides to try to identify whether it be interns or opportunity for growth from, sort of bringing people up in the business so that we can recruit that top level talent.
Emily, how about running a business? How do you feel the whole business community of women leadership? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think probably the biggest challenge I've faced probably since turning 30, which was a while ago at this point, is really funding. Um, 3% of VC funds go to white women, 97% go to men. If I were a woman of color, it would be 0.3%. So I am grateful for the 3% of VC funding we are able to get. But that's just going to, whatever the opposite of extending a runway would be, right? Like that's going to give women and non-binary founders and entrepreneurs less of a runway, less capital to work with. I do think it forces us to become that much more crafty, creative, entrepreneurial, figure it out no matter what. I mean, we built at I Voted Festival the largest single night digital concert in history in 2020 without funding. And, when I go to different male colleagues who are fully funded or have had success running their events and ask for advice, I'm often told, it looks like you're doing too good of a job that you don't need funding. Or what do you need funding for? I'm like, I don't know, rent, food, paying our team, paying our artists, all of those things would be great. So it's challenging being an entrepreneur no matter what, no doubt, but it can be depressing to look at those stats and realize the barrier to entry for funding is incredibly difficult, especially when we continue at I Voted Festival to produce these amazing events. But we're 5 years old this year, and we're starting to get a little bit of funding. But yeah, and that's why those resources of supporting, funding, mentoring young women, non-binary entrepreneurs, people of color is crucial for the long term.
Can you also, Emily, talk about being an author and a podcaster? Do you see anything in those fields?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting. Even when I join kind of authors groups or I just joined the Authors Guild, it was all male panels at their first event that I watched. And I was shocked because I'm on the board of South by Southwest, and we're specifically told to downgrade panels that are all white men. So I was surprised to see that in the arts, in the lit industry. Podcasters, I don't have the stats on that, but I know that the vast majority of podcasters are men. So again, the more we can be encouraging women, the more we can be, publishing women. I don't have a publisher. I'm totally self-released. In fact, I reached out to a publishing friend just saying, hey, my book is really taken off. Like, I'm super busy with I Voted Festival. And he's like, oh, I called different men in the industry, seeing if they had ideas for a book, even though this person actively engages with me on social media all the time, seeing that I'm a writer. So yeah, it's definitely challenging, being a woman author. And then podcasting. Yeah, I should pull the stats on that because I am told constantly that it is very, very, very male dominated. But, our new podcast, the hashtag I Voted Festival podcast, is 100% women team, which is no surprise because our C-suite is 100% and our overall team is 92% women, non-binary, BIPOC, or LGBTQ+. So yeah, it's just really important to lead by example, make sure we're training and mentoring the next generation, and making sure we are hiring and promoting those students and those young people into positions of leadership.
Leslie, I'm going to ask you just a slightly different question, because we're going to come back to women in the live music field and all of that. But I want to ask you, how does this make you feel when you hear these women say what a challenge we have for young folks like you?
Well, they are 100% correct. I do think that there is most of a challenge. And it's been in recent years that I look at it as not so much breaking through the glass ceiling, but making it look a little more reflective onto who's on top. And then it's, I've read countless articles of the women who are making it, to the top. Most of them lie in radio promotions right now. On the label side, there is a very vast majority of women, but it has been slower than I would like. As a young person, I really wish we would be a little bit farther along.
Yeah, for sure. So then I want to circle back to all three of you. We know in the engineering field that we have a lot of work to do there. And I'm happy to say our chief recording engineer here at App State, while he is a male, is doing a lot to promote women. And we even have a group called the Femgineers, which I thought was pretty good. It's a club that they have for the female and underrepresented. They're inclusive there. But we know that field. How about other fields? And Leslie, I'll toss this to you first. Other fields where you feel we're still more male represented than some fields. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely tell you production management is one of those. I don't recall in any show in the last year or so that I've done where I haven't been the only woman, if not the only person of color in the room. You know, I've been very lucky to be a part of advocacy programs, internships where it has been more, you know, younger people, women of color, people of color. But as Emily said before, it's very much that's lacked in management. You know, and that's why I think working with companies like Collective Entertainment, where it is 100% women, working with people like the interns that I voted, where they're selected not only because they're great at what they do, but they're welcomed because they're LGBTQ, BIPOC, etc. You know, things like that are kind of what drives me most in working. But I do see that, you know, it is getting better, just not at the rate that I think it should be.
Good. I'm glad. Don't be satisfied.
Exactly.
Emily, thoughts on that?
On the live industry?
On what aspects of the industry do we have the most work to do?
All of them. I mean, for sure, like audio production, live music, there are some great changes happening in those spaces. I love the femgineers. I met some of the femgineers through teaching with you, and I've actually recommended them to different authors who are like, how do I make a podcast? And I'm like, well, start with this group. They can help you. I know producer Jim Eno is doing a lot of great work out of his studio in Austin. I'm going to botch it, but you'll get the idea. I mean, he's like working with women engineers and starting a program for women engineers, because again, I think the stats on that are like 1% of engineers are women in the audio space. But there are a lot of great groups to support you in that, to help you get internships, to help with mentorship, to help even with that fear, you know, that comes with barrier of entry. In the live space, for sure, I used to tour manage for years. I know tons of young women and non-binary students who really want to get into the live sector. And I also know tons of artists that prefer a woman or non-binary tour manager or crew member. So we do need to work on connecting those dots. There aren't always a lot of great resources in the live space. So the more we can be doing, you know, again, workshops, mentoring students to help them figure out those barrier to entries, the better. But like I said, it's the case all around. You know, like those stats that we have at I Voted Festival, where basically 92% of our team is diverse, and we're talking about in 2020 we had over 250 volunteers. Like, we're a little proactive because I'm on the board of Well Done. So we work with some Well Done students, but for the most part, you all come to us and they see their faces reflected in our C-suite, in leadership. And so we have this literally diverse student body that applies. So it's the case everywhere you go, whether it's, you know, the major agencies. Katie can speak more to, you know, the major labels and major publishers, but I just cannot reiterate enough. You have to hire and promote women, non-binary folks, and people of color if you want more to apply. Representation is literally how it works. So if we don't see ourselves represented in the highest parts of any company, whether you're an author, whether you're an artist, whether you're an agent or whatever, then it's like, well, why, whether it's conscious or not, then why should I bother applying? But when you do promote women, non-binary folks, and people of color in your companies, it's amazing how those applicant pools just blow up and light up. Instead of just being like, oh, how do we get more women to apply? That's how you get more women to apply, by promoting and hiring women, non-binary folks, and people of color.
Emily, I have a question that's come in for you, and we'll certainly take questions from the audience as they come. Someone wants to know, is there research available regarding gender representation in podcasting?
I did some quick Googling while we were on this. I want to do some more of it. It looks like 94% of podcasters are men, 6% are women or non-binary. So we obviously have a lot of work to do in that space. I am a part of the Female Podcasters Group, which has been an amazing group for resources when even just figuring this stuff out, like what mic do I use? What software do I use? I had never recorded a thing in my life until a podcast network asked me to do a podcast on my first book, Interning 101. And it's not hard. You really do need a mic and some basic recording software. And I am not a musician, so I promise if I can figure it out, you can all figure it out too. And just try, just give it a shot. Like the Interning 101 podcast, like shout out to Scott Laguerre if he's listening, because I know he uses it for his class at Minnesota State Mankato. But that podcast is okay, is what I'm trying to say. My second podcast was a hit because I figured out how to do it on the first one. So again, we just have to put ourselves out there and try, and that's how we're going to grow and learn in these spaces. But definitely have a lot more work to do in the podcasting space, that's for sure.
Katie, overarching view of the industry? Katie, we'll toss that question to you.
I'm sorry, my internet just cut out. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Overarching view of the industry, where do we have the most work to do?
I definitely think the production and engineering is the biggest sort of ground to cover. I would also like to see more females in actual leadership positions in terms of like running major labels. We just don't have a lot of that yet. We do have a female president at Universal, so I'm excited about that. I just don't think that we have the representation that we need in terms of the figureheads of the labels. But I definitely feel like the biggest ground to cover is in that production and engineering standpoint for us. I definitely have had female tour managers, and it's funny that Emily brought that up too, because a good friend of mine is a female tour manager. And so through my work with She Leads, I have now networked her with some up and coming. And I really do think that really we are the best allies we can be to each other in reality. I mean, I can't impress upon everybody the importance of having a network and finding your tribe, or at least finding someone that can help you, because I'll find most people want to help. If you ask the question, they're willing to help, and being able to draw on other people's experiences and their sort of networks are going to be hugely helpful in terms of bringing everybody. It's that rising tide lifts all boats kind of scenario. And to the representation point of it, you want to see yourself in the next generation that's coming, and they want to see that it's possible by looking at you. So.
Let's see. Okay, we've kind of hit this. My next question is, what can we as women do to foster and develop young women who want to go in the industry? And we talked about promoting people and giving them role models, but what can we do for them as they're going through school and they're developing their confidence? What else can we do for them? And maybe, Leslie, I'll start with you. Any mentors that were particularly helpful for you? Or how did you become the strong individual that got Emily's attention?
Well, one of my mentors is Ray Steinman. He's a big name in the production world when it comes to live music, and he was probably the only gentleman that gave me the time of day when I was an assistant at a radio company. And then Emily is actually one of my mentors. She still is one of my mentors. I think more so than anything, Emily's honesty and ability to explain the nuances of the music industry, the things that need to be done to get things done. Those two people have pretty much been the biggest influences in my career thus far. And kind of just the few women that I have encountered in management positions who have been helpful in the ways of explaining things, not just as the way that things are right now, but what we need to do to get to the way that things should be. If I'm being honest, most of the mentors that I've had in my career have been women.
Okay, I've got a comment. What about mapping the pathways of some of the women who have risen to leadership roles? Might that be some valuable research? Katie, let's just take you at the senior vice president level. How did you work your way up through the ranks?
I mean, you can't overstate the importance of hustle. The reality is the music business is a very alluring business, right? Everybody wants to be rubbing shoulders with artists and out on the road and flying private jets and stuff. And like I said, here I am sitting in this crusty hotel room in Dallas that smells a little bit like feet and old people, but I'm happy to be here. And I had a 7 a.m. flight to get here. Do you know what I mean? So I can remember wearing my mother's Talbot's pantsuits to my first internship in Nashville, where I literally made $0. And then couldn't stay there long enough late at night. I identified whatever the need was that needed to be met and met it, because I was not going to lose a potential employment opportunity at this place if I could avoid it. Be a good hang. I mean, that sounds pretty basic, but the reality is that if people want to be around you, they want to champion you. And you should try to surround yourself by finding people that want to speak your name in a room full of opportunities. Again, I was very fortunate in that I've always had a very strong belief in what I stand for. And so I've always felt welcome to speak my opinion. I'm also literally a 5-foot-tall lesbian. And so conversations literally happen above my head. And so I learned very quickly that I had to not only embrace my voice, but use it. And I've been really fortunate in that I have been in positions where people have not only appreciated that, but encouraged it. And I think that really helped set the foundation for me to continue to achieve and to believe. So I also think it's really key to try to celebrate people's strengths. Everybody has something they're really good at, and many people have many things they're good at. So especially if you're in the position of being able to run a team or to build a team, I think it's key to identify people's strengths and figure out how you can celebrate those and help them grow.
Okay. Emily, will you just give a little more background on how you moved into where you're at? I've heard this story, but I don't want to take it for granted that others have.
Yeah, I'll be super quick on that because I think there's a more general way we can support on this topic. But I didn't know anyone in the music industry when I started. I went to Northeastern University. I did 8 or 9 internships as an undergrad. The first one I got through our school. Everything else just kind of was built on top of the next. I started working with the Dresden Dolls when I was an undergrad. Started tour managing them. Joined their management team. Officially when I graduated. At that point, a couple years later, my boss left to work at Live Nation Artists in Miami. I was invited to join that. That fell apart in like 8 or 9 months. And I launched my first management company in 2008. What I wanted to add to that is just being open about our stories and about our experiences and our vulnerabilities, right? So when I say Live Nation Artists fell apart, when I'm speaking to undergrads, I really try to slow that part down and be like, I was laid off, I was in tears, I was freaking out, where in hindsight, that was such a blip on the radar. And also like I was 25, I was fine. There were other people that had moved down to Miami with kids and mortgages and a million other things. So yeah, just reminding young people of that fear, of those insecurities, that it's okay to get fired. It's okay to get laid off. This stuff's gonna happen. And, I had very specific goals for my career. And I think I achieved none of them because my careers actually exceeded my wildest dreams and expectations. So have goals for sure and set out and go for them. But as long as you work hard, as long as you're a good person, getting back to everyone is super important. Those things are what's going to make the difference for the long term. So yeah, so I think it's really helpful just to be open about these fears and about these insecurities. And again, it's like how we find these diamonds in the rough and recruit such amazing teams, because it's like I was speaking at a university and sharing kind of my background and some of the parts that were scary and the elements I could really empathize, like where I could really empathize to what they're going through. And at the end, this student just opened up and said, I'm graduating soon. I'm dealing with so much anxiety, so many mental health issues. Like, and I was like, just bring it in. Like, if you want to come intern for us, like, we'd love to have you. And this person has been a shining star for our team ever since. So again, I think the more open we can be about these vulnerabilities, insecurities, things that were scary then that are zero scary now, that all plays into representation. It's just like, oh, well, she's been through that. And, so I can get here. And not to totally like take over this panel, but Katie, I'm so curious about what it has been like to be gay in the country music industry, because I'm totally spacing on that amazing documentary on that amazing artist that I've seen. But if you don't mind speaking to that, I think that's incredibly powerful for the audience.
Sure. I mean, I kept it obviously to myself for a while for obvious reasons. I mean, because we are still a little bit behind the curve in terms of country. I mean, we're just now started seeing people that are able to talk about who they are openly. So I can tell you a funny story that I had my boss outed me to one of our very conservative artists about 2 weeks into my job at Universal. And I remember thinking, I'm not really sure I'm going to bounce back from that. But at the same time, I feel like that there was a part of me too that also came to terms with the fact that shouldn't have any impact on what I do. I mean, sadly, we deal with, you deal with sort of bias and, sort of people's opinions all the time. So there was a concern, honestly, because I didn't want that sort of reflected on my artist if that was going to be a negative that was attached to me. But I think the reality is that I also wasn't going to not be who I am, and I also knew that my work ethic and that my body of work and my relationships were going to trump any kind of bias that I would counter. And the fact is if that was going to happen, then so be it. That was their problem and not mine. So, and we're thankful, obviously, the entertainment industry side of things. There are a lot of us working in it. Very few artists that are willing to sort of be out in our format. But now it's just one of those things that sort of, I'm proud of who I am. I'm excited. It took me a long time to come to terms with it personally. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand how hard that can be on somebody, regardless of your career path. And so it's really encouraging to see, in fact, the person that I mentioned earlier that I'm sort of mentoring had hit me up because I had made a passing comment on another panel I had done. And she called me because she was really concerned about being able to be who she was. And honestly, that's been one of the more gratifying things that's happened in my career in the last 5 years, regardless of how many number ones I've had or what, worked or whatever. So I think that that's so important too, in terms of, hey, we're all here. You can be who you are. Again, we'll celebrate you and, and cheer for you.
That's beautiful.
Okay, I've got, thank you, Katie. I've got a question from our audience here. And I'm not sure how to think this. What are the common barriers at each level of your career? People get stuck in roles, how to work around the circumstances. Anyone?
They can be kind of age specific. I was sexually harassed twice as an intern at 2 separate internships. I actually just reported one of those to Live Nation. I couldn't believe it had been 20 years. I remember kind of a few years after that, I wasn't always heard. And I think I speak pretty clearly. So again, it's really important to, no matter your gender, back up women, echo people of color. I remember I was at a consulting meeting for a festival conference thing that ended up not happening. And the head of it was like, how do we get to Wilco? How do we get to Wilco? And I was like, oh, I managed 2 of the guys in the band. But how do we get to Wilco? And I was like, what is happening here? So again, that kind of became an issue in my late 20s into my 30s. Like I said, now it's definitely funding. I just feel like I'm constantly showing, not telling. But we are starting to get there. And this is interesting too. Like I have noticed it's generally men who ask me who I work for. I haven't worked for anyone for over 15 years. And young women tend to like notice that in me right away. So we're always trying to, I hate to say it, like prove ourselves, show our value. But the more we can, invest in women, hire, promote, that solves a lot of these problems inherently.
And I just got something in thanking Katie again for being open with us and sharing. So here, I think, is my hardest question. And Emily, you came close to it. The three of you are all obviously very strong, very confident women at different stages in your careers. I want to know what you would suggest, particularly for our male colleagues. How do they foster the development of some of the shyer, more reserved, young, brilliant, bright, capable young women? But how do our male colleagues support them and help them come into their own?
Yeah.
That's a tough one, isn't it?
I mean, we've been saying this throughout, it's hire and promote, right? Be open-minded, be all ears, be welcoming, but don't be surprised if, you're a middle-aged straight white guy and your young female and non-binary team members might not always be super comfortable approaching you. Like I learned that really early on. I was interviewing an intern applicant for our company like over a decade ago. And I was like, why do you want to intern here? And she said, I'm more comfortable working for a woman. So again, like you can even, if you're a guy, you can take the burden off yourself a little bit by hiring and promoting women because they're going to be more comfortable speaking to leadership, seeing themselves in leadership, and knowing they can get there. It doesn't mean, you shouldn't be proactive as far as mentoring, but again, hire and promote, hire and promote, hire and promote. I'll throw invest in there as well. And that's what's going to help your company and your business for the long term.
And I was actually thinking of in academia, before we send them out to you, how do we support them and get them ready to go the extra mile when they get out there?
Yeah.
Leslie, maybe? Go ahead.
Let me just add to that quickly. I was sexually harassed at 2 different internships, and I would love to be wrong. This is MEIEA, but I never see that addressed in college programs. That wasn't addressed when I was in college. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know what HR was. Are we teaching what HR is? Are we running workshops on sexual harassment? Are we talking about substances? Katie talked about being a good hang. What does that mean? I know what that means, but I no longer drink, right? What if you're not comfortable drinking? What if there are people taking drugs, right? So as educators, we need to be running workshops, bringing in speakers, talking about sexual harassment, talking about substances. Those are 2 things that I see missing from college programs, as well as making sure that we know every revenue stream that's owed to an artist who writes and records. But that's not what this panel is about. But those are the things that I tend to see missing in music business programs.
Leslie, do you feel like you got any of that in your college program?
Oh, most definitely. I think, maybe just making the topics a little bit more modern. I heard, in my education stories and both presented with articles, and they were only men. You know, I heard a lot about Rick Rubin, but I didn't hear much about, you know, people like Brenda Romano, you know, Julie Greenwald over at Caroline. And it was, I think, yeah, I think investing in speakers, investing in the education and forming relationships with your students, specifically the ones who are, you know, BIPOC and female, and kind of understanding that redefining success on what it used to be based on what the male agenda was is supremely important. I think that every male colleague should want to not just hire and promote, but also form a relationship and an understanding of what it means to be a woman, a person of color within the industry today. That's where I think you'll see bigger strides happening. I would love to get hired on A or B project, but most of the time I find it that I get hired, my management is sitting there and they're not talking to me. They're not asking me what my experience has been. They're saying, you did a great job today. And it's, you know, radio silence from beginning and the end to the project. I'm doing a great job and I'm fulfilling the need of a role, but there is no fostership of relationship. And I think that, you know, could benefit most of the male colleagues in the industry, is to learn from us.
Katie, thoughts on that?
I would say, I mean, it's sort of along the lines of hire and promote. I'm a big fan of advocating, especially for people that maybe haven't found their voice yet. There are so many people that work really, really hard, but aren't great at self-promotion. And so I'm always very cognizant of that in terms of trying to sort of identify people and to give them the opportunity. You know, we have staff meetings. We have 90 plus people at Universal, and every week we have a staff meeting that everyone is there. And so I have made it a point to make sure that everybody from my team is recognized during that staff meeting. And every week, that means that requires a little bit of extra prep for me, but I do it because they might not have that opportunity to shine in that staff meeting otherwise. You know, and I think the same thing, I think about my mentors, my male mentors were really, really great about, you know, putting me in positions where I had a chance to sort of shine in front of the decision makers and all that kind of stuff. So, and they did that because I wasn't necessarily at that time willing to sort of raise my hand and demand to be heard. So I think being able to be advocates for people is so key, regardless of gender.
Katie, I really, really get the feeling you're able to raise your hand and be heard now in this day and age. How did you make that transition?
I think a lot of it was confidence, honestly. I think it was having other people sort of believe and then putting together sort of that body of work where I began to feel more comfortable in my skin just as a human as well as my work. And again, I think that every little success that you have is a stepping stone to a bigger success. And, you know, you sort of create this atmosphere, and I'm such a promotion person, obviously so competitive, but you sort of creates this atmosphere of winning, right? And it's sort of expecting excellence beyond that. And so, look, I still have imposter syndrome. I mean, and I hate to break it to everybody, but there's always going to be a boys club. Like, this is never going to entirely go away. We're smashing ceilings left and right. But the reality is that I still have some artist managers that want to talk to my boss sometimes, you know, and there's also the element at this point in my career, you choose your battles, you know, in my mind. And I understand that doesn't diminish the value of what I do either way. Sometimes, and frankly, a lot of the times it's because it's a problem. I'm like, good, I'd rather him handle it anyway. You know, clean up on aisle 12 is not for me. Great. Yeah, but I do think that so much of that is, again, being able to find your spot and to understand what your strengths are and be able to play to them. And that just creates this element of being confident and then being able to feel like that you are owed the opportunity to speak and to achieve and to embrace it. And don't give that up. Don't give it up ever.
That's such a classic move, like overlooking someone to try to go to the fancier person, when in reality, like, Katie's the one in Dallas right now. Katie's the one like working you to radio, talking to the music directors and stuff like that. Like, I go out of my way, and Katie's definitely not an intern, but I go out of my way to introduce myself to interns when I have a meeting and I am meeting with the boss or whatever. And like, this isn't why I do it because like, I know how it feels to be sitting there. But I've had people come to me years later, like, I sat in that office all summer and you were the only person to ever like acknowledge me or say hi to me. So yeah, it benefits you to not overlook people. And I see it all the time in management, you know, like that stereotype of like the middle-aged white guy or whatever on the millionth floor. Well, in reality, like, Leslie's the one hustling and making stuff happen and is like out there networking and at shows. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like the person on the 50th floor or whatever works hard too, but they might be busy with like kids, family, aging parents, whatever. So yeah, just like there's benefits to a diverse team beyond just like trying to skip steps, because you're not going to get as much attention or worked as hard as radio. I would go direct to Katie. I don't know why everyone overlooks
In
you.
fairness, it's really one guy, and I'm still a little bit butthurt about it, but I'm fine. I've gotten over it. It's all good.
I hear you.
Questions, anything else from our audience? We've had some good things come in. I've got Denise watching the chat for me. So anything else coming in that you'd like to ask these very capable women? I'm not seeing anything pop up. So we have 4 minutes, according to my computer clock, which isn't always right, but I think that's pretty close. Final words on the topic. Let's start with Emily.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a broken record over here, but yeah, just hire, invest, promote. I mean, I literally have other company owners say to me, like, how did you recruit such a diverse team? And that's really the answer. I mean, you can definitely research on how to make job posts, more inclusive. And elements like that are super important. Like, for example, statistically, if there's a job posted and there's 5 requirements, a man might only have 1 or 2 and be like, excuse my language, like, fuck it, I'm just going to apply. Where women, we tend to statistically feel that we need 1 more degree or 1 more certificate. So there are some things, we can all do to be more inclusive, to attract more diverse teams. But like I said, I Voted Festival is the ultimate example. Like, y'all come to me. We're so diverse. I'm so inspired by our team, and it's just a testament to Leslie, as well as our CMO, Melissa Garcia. We really lead by example and want the young women and the young people of color that we train and mentor to take over the organization. That's the whole goal. I know that's the goal at Well Done as well. We want to be replacing board members with well done students. So yeah, so hire, invest, and promote, and it's what's best for your business, and it really does. It really is what's going to make the future better for all of us.
Katie, I'll go to you next.
I'm just so excited that it wasn't me that dropped the first F-bomb, because I'm going to tell you, I've been over here like pit sweating this entire time thinking my regular salty language was going to make its way in. But I would say 2 things. Be curious. This kind of goes back to your earlier question, just in terms of the evolution of things. I think one of the things that's kept me sort of fresh in this business after 25 years in it is that I'm always wondering why, and always asking why, and asking, is there a better way to do something? I think that really helps. It also helps sort of continue those conversations with maybe people at a more senior level than you are at that moment. And that can be really helpful too. I'm having lunch when I get back with our CFO to kind of go through our P&L and also to sort of talk strategy for our streaming strategy. And I'm asking that because we have a thing that we sort of call GM training at UMG, where it's not anything formal. It's just, you want to learn about the business, then ask the people that know things that you don't know, right? That's a great way to expand your network, and it's a great way to stay on those people's radars. And the other thing I would say is just continue to be a champion yourself and champion other people.
Okay, Leslie, I'm going to give you the last word as the person who's most recently been working with college professors. Last word on what we can do to help young women and young folks, diverse folks, be successful in the industry.
Definitely promote. Foster those relationships with these young women who you see that are a little bit silent in the corner of the room. Ask them what they'd like for their futures. These questions that you asked us are extremely helpful. I mean, I have a lot to go over after this chat within myself and what I'm going to tell my colleagues and some of my friends who might be watching this right now. But yeah, I think finding out the story as to why somebody wants to do something in specific, if they are a person of color or women, redefine what that success is. I think that it's completely changed from what it was 20 years ago for a traditional male as a manager to what it is now for what it might be for a woman who is. yeah, I think networking is supremely important. I came to Emily, God bless Kevin Lyman, from his from his board opportunity at I Voted. He mentioned what she was doing, and Emily has promoted me time and time over. True to the word that she says, I really do think that the more people you tend to seek out, the better. So I encourage every single student listening here, seek out people who look like you, who are doing the work that you want to do, and be extremely resilient.
Very good. And I had one question. I don't think we're going to go down that rabbit hole because we're 1 minute over here, and I know how important it is we keep to the schedule. So I want to say thank you to you ladies for joining us today as educators in this industry. We super appreciate it. And I appreciate the two of you who are educator practitioners or soon to be educator practitioners. And Leslie, I wish you the best of luck as you're pursuing your career here. So thank you, ladies. Thank you from all of us at MEIEA for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.